Practicing law without a license, does it happen?
Well, of course it happens. Anytime the market has a demand for a particular service, there's always going to be people with the necessary skills and talent who come forth to profit off that demand, in spite of any artificial legal red tape the government might put in their way. A better question would be, is it a problem?
Well, that takes us to this week's case. It involves a real woman in Pennsylvania, Kimberly Kitchen. Kimberly had been practicing law for 10 years, and she was very well ingrained in the local bar establishment.
Well, if she could get away with practicing law without a license for that long, chances are she probably knew what she was doing.
One year, the bar president was preparing a list for a Christmas party, and
good thing he didn't pull the secret string opening the secret compartment of my secret box, revealing one embarrassing snapshot of SpongeBob at the Christmas party! Merry Christmas, SpongeBob!
he was listing the attorneys along with their bar numbers.
So for a little bit of context for those who might not be familiar, once someone is admitted to practice law by the State Bar Association, they're given a bar number. This number is what they use to identify themselves as a lawyer. So anytime an attorney would represent somebody in court or fill out certain types of legal documents, they would have to use that bar number to basically prove that they're actually a lawyer and not Joe Blow off the street claiming to be a lawyer. I have a little bit of context on this because when I was younger I actually wanted to be a lawyer.
Came to Kimberly and he said, whoa, this number very similar. Wow, this number is identical to another number.
Well, first of all, your system's kind of a joke when it's not only that easy to circumvent, but it also takes a full decade to discover an error that fucking trivial. Second of all, think about how exactly it is she got caught. She didn't botch up a case or screw over a client or anything like that. She was discovered over something very technical regarding a Christmas party. I mean, if she scammed or screwed over her clients, that would be one thing, but it sounds like her clients and even other lawyers liked her. If what ultimately ends up blowing her cover is some small technical detail that was uncovered due to something that didn't even involve the practice of law, I'd say that's a pretty good case to just cut her some fucking slack.
He did some additional investigation. Well, Kimberly came forward and said, here is my law degree from Duquesne University. Here is the admission to the Pennsylvania bar. Here are my bar exam results. Here's the check I paid to the bar for being a member. Well, as it turned out, all of those documents were fraudulent. They were false.
Yeah, that tends to happen when you put bullshit red tape and artificial hurdles to entry around a particular industry. People forge documents to try and circumvent it. I live in a state that only allows for marijuana for medicinal use, so I would know a thing or two about this.
In fact, Kimberly was not a member of the bar, even though she'd been holding herself out as such for 10 years.
And yet, in spite of this, she was able to make her clients very happy and even gain respect from other professionals in the field. If anything, this casts doubt upon the justification for the Bar Association having monopoly on the practice of law.
She was convicted of practicing law without a license, and she was sentenced from 2 to 5 years in prison.
You know there's something wrong with a system where you can wind up in jail for making your customers happy. I mean, if she was scamming people, defrauding people, I'd be like, yeah, throw her ass in the slammer. But in this case, the only thing she was really doing was providing a service.
As a result of this unlawful practice of law.
Actually, that prison sentence is largely due to forging the documents. Practicing law without a license usually only results in a fine or a cease and desist order.
Seems like a pretty heavy penalty. Well, it is, because people must be properly vetted. They must be tested before they are admitted to the law.
Well, obviously, I don't think anyone out there would trust Joe Blow off the street to represent him in court or draft his contracts. The problem is that state bar associations have a monopoly on testing and certifying lawyers. As a result of this, the process of becoming a lawyer is very difficult and cumbersome. If we had multiple organizations that could test and certify lawyers, this would definitely help the process move along quicker. So I work in information technology, and in our industry there's a whole whole bunch of different certifications you can choose from to prove your skills to employers. And these certifications cover different fields, like some of them cover networking, some of them cover cybersecurity, some of them cover SQL, database administration, things like that. You could similarly have different certifications for different fields of law, like, a certification for criminal law, certification for torts, negligence, a certification for family law and prenups, things like that. This is another problem with the current system. When you go to law school and take the bar exam, you have to learn about all these different fields of law, not just the specific field of law that you plan to practice in. This means that prospective attorneys have to spend a lot of time and resources on shit they'll never use. Makes you kind of wonder whether or not this is all about vetting for quality, or just a nifty way for lawyers to make it harder for you to compete with them.
Because they do a public service.
Can you define public service then? Because that's a term the government frequently uses to justify monopolizing things.
And in generally, most instances, they do a service to a specific individual.
And if that individual is voluntarily consenting to the service being provided, there's no moral issues with it. All a license is an artificial monopoly created by the state. The state basically takes away a right to do something you already have the right to do, in this case enter into voluntary agreements, and basically sells back to you the right to do it. It would be like if I walked into a garage, took a kid's bike, and told the kid, I'll give it back if you give me $100.
And that individual can be very badly harmed if that person who's practicing law is not qualified to practice law.
Well, first of all, people can be harmed by lawyers who are qualified. One of the things state bar associations do is actually shield lawyers from responsibility for malpractice, because now instead of being answerable directly to the client that they harmed, they're answerable to some kangaroo disciplinary hearing that's more often than not just a slap on the wrist. Second of all, this argument doesn't really bear on the issue at hand. This is not an instance of somebody practicing law without a license and doing harm. Specifically, what's at issue here is that Miss Kitchen wasn't doing harm. Her clients liked her. Heck, it seems like even other lawyers liked her. She was able to perform the job competently in spite of not being qualified. Attorney Allen here seems to believe that this whole situation warrants criticism toward Miss Kitchen. I'd say it warrants criticism toward the system used to qualify lawyers. If someone can make their customers happy for a decade, but gets in trouble just because they didn't have the right piece of paper first, your system probably needs to be revamped, or at the very least carefully reconsidered.
In this instance, Kimberly had been so well ensconced in the local bar community that she had served as president.
So it appeared then that the legal community actually has confidence in her skills and ability to perform the job. If they like her enough to make her president of the bar association, her clients like her, other lawyers like her, dude, just give her a fucking license. Who gives a rat's ass that she didn't bankrupt herself for life at some overpriced Ivy League degree mill?
Of the local bar association. So what can you do? What can you do?
Well, that's just the thing about the free market. Whenever you ask what can you do, there's more often than not more than one answer. As I've mentioned a moment ago, we can have certifications that verify that these people have the skills that they claim they do, as well as looking at reviews and customer feedback. In fact, there's actually a website called Avvo, which is basically Yelp for lawyers. So whenever you ask what can you do, the simple answer is the free market says apply your imagination.
Well, if you're thinking about hiring an attorney, you go to the local bar association website, or better yet, you go to the website for the state bar.
Or you could evaluate them based on their actual talent and ability to perform the job, instead of whether or not they have some magic piece of paper from the government. I mean, this is one of the reasons that college is so overpriced these days. Employers tend to put more emphasis on credentials than skills.
And on the website for the state bar, there is normally a place where you can search for the names of attorneys. Write in the name of the individual who you are thinking about hiring. There will then come up a bar number generally, and if there doesn't come up a bar number, there at least will be an indication as to whether or not that person is in good standing to practice law in the state in which you are living.
Oh yeah, that's another nifty little thing the Bar Association does to grab lawyers by the balls. You see, not only do they make you jump through a bunch of hoops to become a lawyer, but once you are a lawyer, they can still impose their bullshit onto you. Because you basically rely on them for the right to practice law, well, they can just dangle that over your head like a carrot. And a lot of these rules have nothing to do with how good of a lawyer you are. Some of them put restrictions on how you can advertise, others mandate that you basically work a certain number of hours for free, and in my opinion, the dumbest one, you're not allowed to bill multiple clients for the same time. In other words, you're basically prohibited from multitasking, so travel on behalf of a client is considered billable time. So suppose a lawyer has to fly somewhere to meet up with the client. Now the lawyer could be using that time on the plane to be doing work for another client, but he can't since he's already billing another client for the travel time. So this rule essentially encourages lawyers to work less efficiently than they could be. So the takeaway point here is that you can be a good lawyer and still get disbarred because there's all these stupid rules.
Very important, very important.
You know, I never understood this line of reasoning. Something is important, therefore it should be monopolized.
It takes a few minutes to do this, but it can save you significant grief, can save you, unfortunately, the difficulty of hiring somebody who is, in fact, not qualified to practice law.
Attorney Allen is kind of ignoring the huge elephant in the room here. Miss Kitchen wasn't qualified to practice law, but was still good at it. If the system unfairly weeds out people who are good at it, it may be time to reevaluate the system.
You know, you may remember the movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, where Ulysses Everett McGill was somebody who was serving in Mississippi prison. He was played by George Clooney because he had been practicing law without a license.
So we're using the whole Young Turk strategy of using fiction in place of real-life evidence, I see.
Deregulation in a free market economy that will lead to an even bigger wealth gap sounds like the prologue to the movie Elysium, starring Matt Damon, or Snowpiercer, or any other dystopian future pick where classism runs rampant and the massive lower income classes rise against their small but incredibly wealthy oppressors. If you really want to understand what would happen in a libertarian society, watch that movie, watch Elysium.
Fellow with a lot of gab, but as it turns out, he wasn't a lawyer.
Slight correction. A lawyer is defined as a person who practices law, not a person who practices law with a license. So strictly speaking, he is a lawyer, just an illegal lawyer.
He was sent to prison for practicing law, for not being a lawyer, and today we see that doesn't just happen in the movies, it can happen in real life.
Well, I mean, if works of fiction count as evidence for your point, then I could easily bring up the TV show Suits. Suits follows the story of someone more or less in Kimberly Kitchen's position, someone who's really good at practicing law but doesn't have a bar membership. It's actually a pretty fascinating TV show. I think it's on Netflix. I recommend everyone watching it. Especially now with everyone quarantined inside, there's more time for watching shit.
I'm David Allen, bring you this case. We bring cases every week so you understand how the law works.
This has been Philosophossum, bringing you new bullshit videos to debunk so you understand how logic works. So a lot of you have probably noticed this is a different type of video from what I normally respond to. Why did I choose this video to respond to in particular? Well, two reasons. First reason is, of course, as I've mentioned, when I was younger I kind of wanted to be a lawyer, so I found the topic somewhat interesting, and I recently had a debate with Mr. Anton Dybel, known as a Skeptical Human on YouTube. And one of the issues that kept reappearing in our debate was the whole issue of how our litigatory system is very biased against the little guy. There's a lot of reasons for this, but one of the biggest ones is that the Bar Association has a monopoly on the practice of law. And of course, as anyone who studies economics will know, that anytime you have a monopoly on something, anything, not just lawyers, but anything, you see prices go up and quality go down. So if we didn't have this type of system where lawyers could essentially decide who gets to compete with them, there's a good chance that, legal services would not only be more available to the little guy, but we'd have a fairer legal system overall. So now what do you guys think? Should we improve the system by which we give people the right to practice law? How would you change the system? This has been Philosophossum, making stupidity play dead. Have a good one.